Liverpool winless in 5 and without a Premier League win in 2017, heading into Saturday faced a Spurs side unbeaten in 9 games. However, typically up popped Dr. Tottenham when you least expect it to give Liverpool the boost they needed. This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! 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 Tottenham!
Hi guys, welcome back for another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show as always via iTunes or Acast and get every new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us across all the usual social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs. You can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/eSpurs page. We're also on YouTube, Pinterest and Tumblr. And for all the links to all e-Spurs platforms, just head to our brand new website, which is www.e-spurs.com. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, we're going to be talking about the 2-0 defeat to the hands of Liverpool on Saturday evening. We'll be taking your questions for the panel as always, and we'll be reviewing a couple of cup clashes to come as we take on Gent this coming Thursday in the Europa League, and we'll be previewing the Sunday tie against Fulham at Craven Cottage, a week of cups to come. So, let's get into tonight. Let's introduce tonight's panel that will be joining us to talk us through the next hour of all things Tottenham. I'm pleased to say we've got James McCarthy back on the show. James, how are you?
I'm cracking, Rick. How are you, mate?
Yeah, hanging in there at the moment. We've got Jason back with us as usual. Jace, how are you?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad.
Good. And finally tonight, I'm pleased to announce we've got Dan Tracy, and Dan, I can confirm, is the chief editor of RealFootballMan.com. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Looking forward to making my debut on the podcast, so my first cap should hopefully be a good performance.
Fingers crossed, Dan. Let's hope it was better than the performance anyway on Saturday evening. I tell you what, Dan, we're going to start with you on this week's podcast. I think no arguing what was a bit of a poor performance, but evidence of what we already knew on Saturday. A couple of injuries to key players, and really we just can't rely on our backups, can we? Would you say it's just about that, or is there more to it in your opinion?
No, I think injuries certainly didn't help us with our sort of preparations going into the game, and the injuries of the players that were missing were obviously key ones, the likes of Rose and Vertonghen being out of a back four, which looked shaking in comparison, certainly didn't help. I think Liverpool knew that going into the game with their preparations, and I think the fact that Sadio Mané was sort of ready to be unleashed again after a spell away. I know he sort of started against Hull, but this is the sort of really the game that was sort of set up all for him. Him going up against Ben Davies was no comparison really. I think he had so much joy that realistically he could have even had sort of like 4 goals in the first sort of half, and that's not that's doing a sort of credit to Lloris for keeping us almost in the game. You know, the game was, I guess, almost away from us anyway, but I mean it could have been a lot worse. Just not a good day. Another bad day away from home against the Big Six. We started badly against Manchester City. Thankfully, we sort of woke up and a few changes got us back into the game, but we didn't have that luck on Saturday night. Perhaps if Son had scored his chance on 25 minutes and it's 2-1, it's a different story. But again, like I say, it could have already been sort of 4-0 Liverpool at that point. So, I mean, to be 2-0 down was probably the fair result at half-time, but just never really got a foothold in the game, did we? So, one to forget, in all honesty.
Yeah, bitly decent performance. Let's come on to you, Jace. I think, like I say, it's been highlighted very much so Saturday evening and even Sunday. There was a lot of criticism of Pochettino on social media after the game. Do you reckon those criticisms were fair, at least with regards to Saturday's game?
Well, certainly I think the mild criticism is fair of Pochettino after Saturday because, we knew we had backup player at left-back. We knew that Mané was their biggest threat, and yet we didn't really come up with a system to try and help Davies and neutralise that. We persisted in fiddling about with the ball at the back, even though we was inviting pressure on ourselves every time. And, we know that Pochettino has said he wants his sides to play that way, but maybe when you are getting so much pressure on yourselves, you do have to change the way you do things a little bit, either by changing the shape of the side or by changing the way you're playing or any other way. But we didn't seem to react to anything at half-time, and yet the errors or the gaps in the side were so glaring to everyone that was watching. So, yeah, he certainly has to take his fair share of the blame because at the end of the day, he's responsible for the team that was picked. He's responsible for the shape of the team, and it's his team.
on that, Jace, what do you put it down to? I mean, there was a real lack of aggression in that first half and a lack of pace to the side. I know many are questioning that as well. I know with the loss of Danny Rose and with Eric Lamela out of the team, that's a lot of pace gone. Are we missing pace as a Tottenham team? You know, Spurs teams of the past, the likes of Gareth Bale flying down the wing, even Aaron Lennon, Andros Townsend even give a mention. We seem to have now taken all the pace out of a Spurs side. Are we becoming a bit too technical, relying on the likes of like a Christian Eriksen or maybe a Dele Alli? Are we really lacking that pace now from this side?
Well, I think we've always said we definitely want more pace in the side. There's no question of that. We need more pace in the side, but certainly Saturday. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered if we'd have had a greyhound up front. The fact was we were so wide open, and we were getting so attacked down our left-hand side that, you know, we had to stem that before we could get a foothold into the game, and we were 2-0 down, and could have been a lot worse without. You know, before we laid a glove on them. And it's all right to say, OK, let's have that pace up front and let's go hell for leather at Liverpool, but we had to solve that problem down our left-hand side, and we never did it at all. Yeah,
bitterly disappointing. Let's bring you in, James. James, you come with us on a podcast before. I know you've always been quite complimentary of Pochettino and the way he's managed this Spurs squad. What do you make of the recent criticism of him? I think he's just one win in our last 14 away games against the Premier League's current top 8. It's not good enough, is it really?
It isn't, Rick, no, but I mean, what I like to think about is he sets up with a positive formation, and you guys know as well as I do, whenever the team is announced on social media, no matter what 11 names are down on that sheet, there's always going to be someone who disagrees, and there's always going to be people who moan. So if Pochettino had lined up with 3 centre-halves, 2 full-backs and 2 holding midfielders in front, he'd have been criticised for being too defensive. It just so happened that he decided to go with an attacking lineup and was criticised for being too attacking. You know, some could say that there is no pleasing us, but on this occasion, no, I have to agree, got it completely wrong. It was mentioned so many times before the game that Mané versus Davis was always going to be a cause for concern. I mean, I put the question to you guys on the pod last week whether you think Ben Davis is good enough as a left back at all to have him up against one of the most potent attacking threats in the league in Sadio Mané. You know, we were all pretty worried, but you have to look at the resources that Pochettino had to him. And I don't think personally that Davis was the problem. He is, without Danny Rose, he is our only first team left back. But how we should have set up was we should have set up with someone in front of him who's a lot more defensively minded, someone who's going to track back a lot more. Son is a support striker, he's not a winger. And so things were done wrong, but as I say, sometimes there's no pleasing us as a fan base.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that, and I think we have to take sometimes a step back from the situation and also realise it was only our 3rd defeat so far this season. Yes, again, it's against, you know, on the road, against a big opponent where a lot of people are looking at Spurs, you know, we're also bigging them up as fans to be potential title contenders, and again, we've gone away from home and we haven't delivered. Just, you've touched upon it there, James, that starting lineup. You mentioned that you may, I mean, what would you have changed? Do you think it would have changed from that starting lineup? You mentioned that you would have maybe played someone more defensive. Who would you have maybe switched across? Would you have switched anyone from that team?
I'm not too sure really. I think I would have maybe, and I know it's a bit controversial, I would have brought in Moussa Sissoko and I would have put him in the midfield with Dembele and Wanyama. So just to kind of pack that midfield, we always said that Sissoko's been a better midfielder, a centre midfielder, as he has been a winger. That's where he played for France at the Euros, and was very, very good there. And I think if we pack that midfield and we sit back for the first just even 5 or 10 minutes, which we didn't do. We came out all guns blazing. We left the gaps in behind. If we pack that midfield, we sit back, we relax ourselves on the ball, we play our game for a little while, then we don't get off to the catastrophic start that we did get off to, and we're still in the game at half time, which we weren't.
Yeah, bitterly disappointing. We'll come back round to you, Dan. Personally, for me, I feel a little bit for Eric Dyer. I don't know about you, but I mean, for me personally, he's kind of been shunted around all season. He's been defensive mid, he's been right back, he's been centre back. Obviously, you can't excuse the error he made on Saturday night. You know, many people saying he maybe should have gone to head of the ball rather than try and control it with Mané running around him. What did you make of that? Is it just one of those things, Eric Dyer, an unfortunate mistake, or is there more to it?
No, I think it is just an unfortunate mistake, but you're right in touching on the fact that he's almost become a jack of all trades, a master of none at the moment, because he's being shunted around in so many positions. It's great to have that kind of versatility in your squad because he can fill certain gaps, but for a player of his age and for his development, you sort of get the feeling that he needs to be just one sort of one position and specialise in that so he can be sort of even better. But I guess the problem we've got is, at the moment, where do you sort of put him into the team if he's going to specialise in just one role? So it's trying to accommodate him, but almost sort of sacrificing some of his sort of talents, really. So it's a difficult balancing act. And just to sort of touch on sort of the lineup on Saturday, I thought it was quite worrying that we don't really have a plan B off the bench, sort of looking at the personnel that we had on offer. I mean, in terms of our starting 11, they're almost uncomparable to any other side in the Premier League. You know, it's fair to say they're probably one of, if not the best starting 11. But you step back from that, you look at the subs bench, and there's a big sort of drop off in quality. So when you're chasing a game, it's 2-0, and with the subs we had, it was never going to be sort of likely that we could even get back into the game. So that's a concern, and it's not one that we can sort of really fix until the summer. But I guess going back to Dyer, you need that sort of versatility because our squad isn't as strong. But again, it's sort of where is his best position at the moment. It's a hard one to answer.
It is indeed, it is. Jay's coming to you. Liverpool's £30 million man made a difference on Saturday. Tottenham's didn't come on to the 77th minute in Muta Sissoko. You look at that bench, we've got Janssen on there, we've got Nkudu on there. I hate to say it, I know we've obviously had the injuries this season, and I know Wanyama, bar him, I mean, the recruitment, has it been good enough?
Well, clearly it hasn't been this year, but you know, it's an interesting thing. If I just look at the battles between the top six sides, and I look at our time under Pochettino, everyone talks about we need a game changer to come off the bench to nip these types of games. But the fact is, when you compare us to those other sides, we've actually scored more goals than Man United against those top six sides away. They've won 4 games, we've only won once. We've scored more goals than Chelsea in those games. They've won 3 times, we've only won once. The difference is that we haven't kept a single clean sheet in those games. Chelsea have kept 4. That's your difference. If you concede goals to those sides, particularly the really sloppy goals, then it's all very well having a game changer to come on, but you can't go to Liverpool and Manchester City and places like that and give them a 2-goal start. You've got to give yourself a solid base. And like I say, you know, you look at Manchester United, they've scored 7 goals away from home against the top 6 in 3 years. They've won 4 games.
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, bearing in mind, Jace, the wage structure the club has in place at the moment, we know the net spend has been 1 million over the last God knows how many years. How easy is it to improve the overall quality of the backup players that we've got? Is that where we're fundamentally going wrong? Because when we lose in the likes of Danny Rose, Jan Vertonghen, Eric Lamela, we don't seem to have the squad to cope when we go away to the likes of a Liverpool, to the likes of a United, to be able to be confident enough to be able to field, you know, what you would say is our fringe players and expect a decent performance. Or can any team expect that?
Well, I think that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Because, number one, a backup player is obviously by nature not as good as a player he's coming in to replace. Otherwise, he'd be the first team player, not the backup player.
Indeed. But
how would you get a better backup, say, than Danny Rose? And particularly, it's important, I think, when we've lost Vertonghen and Rose, who are in that same type of positions on the pitch. So whoever we bring in is not going to be as good as Danny Rose. Ben Davies, when we signed him, was seen as being better than Danny Rose because nobody liked Danny Rose. And so we thought we made a really good signing in Ben Davies. And then you'll get people that will talk about Sigurdssons and the Chadleys and Jermaine Defoe's and all those. Why haven't we got those on the bench? They'd be better than what we've got. But those players won't sit on the bench, will they? So we definitely want better backup players, but it's not necessarily that easy to do it. What do? You bring in probably the best way to improve the backup is to buy a left back who's even better than Danny Rose, so that Danny Rose becomes the backup player. Other than that, I don't see how you have as good a backup as Danny Rose.
It is a very, very hard one to call. Coming back to you, James, we've seen how difficult it's been this year for Spurs. That when we've been pressed, particularly against the better sides, how do we go about beating it? Is that something under Pochettino that we're still yet to be able to figure out?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and I was saying it not long ago, that we always seem to perform better against a team who comes at us, but in a more expansive way. You know, Chelsea, when Chelsea came to White Hart Lane, they played to their game. They played this attacking, flowing football, but that left the gaps behind them for us to exploit. Then when, say, a team who we've struggled against this year have come to White Hart Lane and put 10 men behind the ball and sat back and sat to their structure, we found it more difficult to break them down. However, this time against Liverpool, they were just relentlessly snappy. They were more aggressive. I don't think it was completely down to game plan. It wasn't how they set up. I think we were a little bit shell-shocked, really, by going to Anfield. You see players like Victor Wanyama, who hasn't made a mistake all season, making 3 in the first half. Players like Eric Dyer, who are usually so formidable on the ball, so you can't get the ball off them usually, and they're making these errors that I haven't seen Moussa Dembele perform as badly as he has ever, I don't think, than he did against Liverpool. And so you can't put it all down to game plan. You can't put it all down to the formation and team and all of this. You know, when we went to Man United, none of the players performed to their potential, and we had pretty much a full squad. You know, seem to remember Harry Kane having the worst game I've seen him have in a very long time. And so, yeah, we can sit here and we can criticise Pochettino for his setup and not being a mystic Meg really and guessing what's going to happen. But really, you have to look at the players, and it is down to the players. Liverpool wanted it more. You could say that was because they were confident. They saw Mané against Davis, and they were confident that they were going to come out on top. But really, we should be going to a place like Anfield with our heads held high. We're just as big a team as they are. We're just as competitive as they are.
Yeah, and the worry thing you say there, James, is that I say they wanted to win more, and unfortunately, Moussa Dembele seems to agree with that, what you just said there, and that's a bit of a worry, I have to say, because, you know, we should be going to these places now. I mean, our away record, it's only 6 defeats in our last 31 games. We've gone away to Man City last season and won. We've taken points off the likes of Arsenal away, Chelsea away last year. We shouldn't be now a side that has to have this fear going away. You know, we are looking to become an established Champions League team. We have pretty much been in that top 4 all season long. You know, we've gone to the places that are hard to get points, and we've gone and got them. So now is a time when we go away to these big clubs to hopefully prove a point that we aren't just, you know, a flavour of the month as such. We are there to last the distance, and unfortunately at the moment, the old kind of things about Tottenham being softies maybe at times is again coming back round to being in question. Dan, I've got to come to you and ask you, the 3-4-3 system seemed to work quite well for Spurs, having that 3 deployed at the back. Bearing in mind the loss of Jan and Rose, is it just a case that we just wouldn't be able to play that system with the backups we've got, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, Kevin Wimmer didn't look too confident in the 3-4-3 against City, so to have him in a back 3 alongside Ben Davies, I don't know if that's a better solution, to be honest. So I think the fact that we lack the personnel to implement that system probably pushed us more in the direction of the back 4 on Saturday. So it's a case of not having the players required to fit the system.
Just quickly, your thoughts, Dan? I don't want to start picking out individuals because it was a really, really poor performance as a team, but Christian Eriksen didn't create a single chance against Liverpool. It's arguably these games as most you want to kind of show up and really prove he's a top game player, don't you? Yeah,
I mean, it's no good him being anonymous if everything creatively sort of runs through him. With him sort of not really, almost not turning up, that sort of almost then takes Kane and Ali out the game also, so in effect, you've almost lost your attacking trio, and it just doesn't help the team overall, really. And again, it's not the first time it's happened with Eriksen. We've seen his slump earlier in the season after he signed a new contract. It was almost as if to say, "Well, I've got my pay rise undone now," and we've seen a resurgence, thankfully. But you know, it's when he needs to be called on, he goes missing again. So it's frustrating because it's not just like a one-off; it's happening a few too many times, really. It's all very well turning it on against the likes of Watford away and things like that, but they're the sort of bread and butter games that we expect to win, no detriment to Watford or anything, but, you know, these are the games which are going to define our season and could possibly be the difference between finishing top 4 or top 6, really. So, yeah, not a good day at the office for Eriksen.
I totally agree with you. And coming back around to you, Jace, Pochettino feels that Spurs deserve more credit for competing at the top end of the Premier League with different tools to their top 4 rivals. Is that a slight, maybe, message to the board that he's working with his hands tied behind his back, or are we looking too much into those comments?
I think you're looking a little bit too much into it. I think he knows the situation. Obviously, he sits down at the start of the summer. They decide their budgets. He knows they're building a stadium. He knew when he took the job on that Levy was looking for somebody that would work with some of the players that we've got, try and develop them. So he knows what's in front of him each and every season that he goes into it. If he doesn't like that, then it's up to him to walk away. But you know, I'm sure he would. I wonder how many players that he's tried to sign that the board have actually said no, you can't sign him. You know, they've backed him with Moussa Sissoko at the end of the day, haven't they? And I know everyone goes on about our net spends, but you know, as much as the net spend is way below what you would expect, we've seen Manchester United spend 150 million quid this year, and they haven't been in the top 4 at all. So it's not simply a question of throwing money at a problem, and it works.
Let's have a quick look then. I mean, for you, Jace, a lot of talk has been about the manager. I mean, I presume you're firmly in the camp that you still feel this guy is the right man, undoubtedly, to take the club forward.
100%. Fully behind him.
Yeah. And same to you boys. James, what do you make of the manager? I know you're, again, rightly so, fully behind the guy, right?
I think anyone who criticises Pochettino as a manager needs to take a step back and have a look at where we've come under him. I mean, I personally have never enjoyed watching a Tottenham team as much as I enjoyed watching this one. You know, Redknapp's Tottenham was Modric and Bale, you know, but this time I absolutely adore watching this Tottenham team. And for Pochettino can take the credit for turning us into a team who was really, we were obsessed about talking about the top four. Top four was all we were talking about for 3, 4, 5 seasons at all. And now we aren't even talking about the top four. We're talking about the league. Yeah. We're talking about we should be looking at the league. We're title contenders, blah, 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 all of this. We haven't even addressed the fact that this top four, this holy grail that we were talking about for years and years, we haven't been out of the top four this season. So to criticise the guy is absolute madness. Yeah, and Dan, what's your thoughts on the manager very quickly? Because, you know, social media out there is a bit of a poisonous place. You read some comments on Saturday night, you have to step back and maybe take a sense of realism as to think where have we come from. I mean, it's the youngest Spurs, you know, in terms of the Premier League, it's the youngest team out there, you know, and he's bearing in mind how to cope with loads of injuries this season. Is he really, like I say, working at times with his hands tied behind his back to some degree? Well, I think he's doing a fantastic job. I think Spurs fans forget, like you mentioned earlier, we've only lost 3 games in the league this season, and perhaps we're not used to losing and we're not taking it as well as we should do, really. But the job he's doing is second to none. You look at where we're going to be in a couple of seasons in the new stadium, and it's just exciting times. You slightly worry, like the managerial situations at, say, Atletico Madrid and Barcelona with Luis Enrique and Diego Simeone maybe leaving in the summer. Will his head be turned by those jobs, perhaps? You really hope not, because you want him to be the man to usher us into that new era at the new stadium. But as a man and what he's done at the club, I couldn't fault him at all. Like James said, I think it's the most exciting Tottenham team I've ever seen in my lifetime. It's just, and there's still so much more to go as well. So yeah, it gets my backing. If you look at him and you say, you know, our home form has been excellent under him. We're challenging for top 4 and things, and all that's stopping us is our away form against the top 6. It's not as if under him that away form has collapsed, is it? No, you know, in the Premier League era, we've played Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, and Chelsea away 100 times, and we've won 6. So, you know, it's not exactly a new problem. 6 wins in 100 away games against those 4 clubs. Yep, and I get, like you say there, Jace, there's no... it just puts into comparison, doesn't it, when we go away to the likes of Liverpool, that there is now an expectation that we're going to get a result, and that's partly down to him because of how far, like I say, we've grown under this manager, and we've got the results we have away at the likes of Manchester City, you know, getting the results away at Arsenal in the past. There is now this expectation of Spurs that we should be going away from home and winning these games, and whilst that's great, we also have to take a sense of realism that when it doesn't go our way, we also have to accept that as well. I think in the coming weeks as well, we have to bear in mind, I think with Spurs, we're the only team in the Premier League left now to not have an away fixture against any other top 6 team left this season. James, how crucial is that for Spurs, bearing in mind that I think the priority probably coming into this season was again to establish Champions League football. In terms of what's on paper for us, that should be doable, shouldn't it? This Champions League place, or are we now looking over our shoulder somewhat in terms of, you know, the United creeping up on us? Not at all. I mean, United's form, you look, I saw a picture of their last 14 games earlier, and fair play to them on an absolutely brilliant run, having a great few results, and yet they're still in 6th. You know, we're absolutely flying high. I think the fact that we haven't got an away game against the top 6, as you say, is really handy. But then again, I don't think we should be fearing teams at the minute. We had Chelsea come to our Halloween and we made them look average, made them look mid-table, and so we shouldn't be scared of these teams. I don't believe in, you know, being afraid to play these teams again. But yeah, as you say, it is a bit of a bonus that we haven't got to play against one of those top teams again. And so we should be really looking to finish this season as strong as possible. And as I say, we're not talking about top 4 anymore. We're talking about the Premier League.
Great point there, really, really good point. Okay guys, well hopefully, like I say, that has wrapped up the therapy for you for the Liverpool game. We're going to take a quick break, and after, we're going to put your questions to the panel as always. Hi guys, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast. As always, we ask you to get your questions into us every week, whether that be in relation to a particular topic on Spurs or possibly against the game we've just had. You can do that as always by tweeting the e-Spurs Twitter account at @e_Spurs, leaving your question and then ending your tweet in #eSpursPod. Guys, you've got into us in your droves this week. Let's crack on and let's ask the guys some of the questions. We're going to come first to you, Jace. We've got I know Alan Gilzine, who asks, if we really want to win the league, given our financial and squad limitations compared with the others, would missing out the European places this season enable a real and proper till at the title next season? Good question.
Well, first of all, he's a lucky boy if he does know Alan Gilzine. No, I don't think so. I think we definitely want to stay within that top four. I mean, the problem comes that whilst you might have a better chance of a tilt for the title, do you lose some of the players that you've got because you're not in that Champions League? Do you miss out on attracting one or two of the players that Champions League football brings you? So whilst you get the benefit maybe of a free run all week, is your squad going to be as strong as it is when you're in that Champions League? I've always had the belief that we should be trying to get European football, and I've said it many times before, it happens to be Europa League football. It happens to be Europa League football. The more big games that you play in, the more quarterfinals, semi-finals, with the pressures and that come with that, the better you'll be in the long run. So for me, I understand that Chelsea are out of it this year and are top of the league, but let's be fair, most teams that have won the league have also been in Champions League at the same time, or they've had European football. I don't remember Manchester United ever being distracted by having to play European football. Manchester City, when they've won the league, have been in the Champions League, and Chelsea, other than this year, have been in the Champions League. So no, not for me.
And I just think, just on the back of that question, I mean, for Spurs really, it's so important that we do maintain this Champions League football, because from a financial perspective, you would argue, Jace, in terms of the planning for the stadium, you would think that having Champions League football would be part of that plan in terms of what ENIC Levy has built, and very much if we're not in that, I think that would maybe cause detriment at all to the budget, to what Spurs are aiming for this stadium to be like. So very interesting question, but I agree it's essential for Spurs to get Champions League football. We're going to move on to, let's go to you, Dan. We've got Hot Shot Tottenham at Yudo90, a regular contributor, who asks, yet again a game that showed our lack of depth and serious lack of pace against Liverpool. Nkudu, clearly Poch doesn't rate him. Has a poor transfer window cost us yet again?
It's a tough one, because ultimately the question is, who do you buy in the January transfer window? Because for the players that are going to hopefully improve our squad, or at least add depth, they're the kind of players that aren't necessarily going to be sold in January, because we're going to be looking at, from bigger clubs. We're looking at, say, someone like Isco. Is he really going to move in January? I very much doubt it, and obviously he hasn't. So it's hard to sort of say a bad transfer window has sort of nobbled our chances of real success. I think that's more to do with injuries than actually not spending money where it's perhaps needed. So I think that's a bit harsh to say, really. But again, I mean, you've got to look at glass half full. We're still be allowed for sort of City probably going on to win later tonight. We'll be still third in the table. It would have been a good opportunity to sort of almost kill off Liverpool and at least take it into like a top 5 than a top 6. But I don't think you can necessarily blame a bad transfer window for where we are right now.
Just on that, Dan, what do you make of the summer overall? If we go back to the summer transfer window, and obviously we look at that really critically, and we say Wanyama has probably been the only player out that you would say has been a success, and you look at Saturday when we're 2-0 down away at Liverpool, he hasn't brung Janssen on in the second half until very, very late. You've got Sissoko sitting there 30 million. You've got Nkudu that can't get on. What do you make of that as an overall? Is that an area we have to improve in the recruitment? Because I just look at, for example, Southampton. They've gone and brought in this Gabardini for, around the same price as Janssen, and he's hit the ground running. Or is that, again, just one of those gambles that you take where some players will pay off and others won't?
I don't think the summer transfer window was good. Certainly not good enough for a team that's then going into the Champions League. Not by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of Janssen, it was a qualified punt, because I think, he's a Dutch international. He scores Dutch goals in the Dutch league. But again, that's not a guarantee, because we've seen Frederick Van Nistelrooy, there's an Alfonso Alves for Middlesbrough. So again, that's not great. But Wanyama is the only man who really comes out with a transfer window in any real credit. it certainly needs to improve. If we're going to sort of go through this sort of cycle again in sort of June or July this year, I think we're going to have to buy better. If we're in the Champions League again, we certainly don't want to make the same mistakes. I think it's hard though because we're not an established Champions League team yet, so the sort of calibre of players you can attract is still probably going to be in that sort of tier below. I guess we can only sort of buy what's available really. I mean, we're not sort of quite where we want to be, and that's sort of reflected in the players we bought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is a difficult one because unfortunately we haven't got the unlimited funds available.
Just on that, Rick, let's just turn the clock back a couple of years ago when we brought Soldado in. Who argued the day we brought Soldado in that was bad recruitment? That was fantastic recruitment, wasn't it? Proven La Liga top level player, Soldado. What happened?
Yeah,
so, you can throw those names that we should have signed rather than the Janssens that we shouldn't have done. Batshuayi's the prime example of that. Lots of people will say we should have signed Batshuayi rather than Janssen. We're now looking at Batshuayi that can't get a game for Chelsea even when Costa's out injured.
No, listen, I completely agree with you. It's one of those things where there's no guarantee. However, it's just one of those things where you would obviously like for a better return to what you buy, but unfortunately there is no guarantee on that. We're going to come back round to you, James. We've got a question here from Jordan Hussein, at Jordan Hussein, who says, "Hi guys, loving the podcast, very insightful." Thank you, Jordan. And he asked the question, I think we've kind of covered this: do we go to a back three again? And if so, do we have the personnel to cover with injuries? James, would you say, just to kind of go on a bit more on that question, once Danny Rose and Jan Vertonghen have come back, would you like to see Spurs switch back to that predominant back three that's been successful?
I think the back three that we did use when we had our first 11, it looked absolutely brilliant. I think it was only 150 odd minutes that we actually played with our first 11 in that formation, but I think we looked absolutely awesome. The stability of that back three with Eric Dyer playing a bit more of a sweeping role behind the two, Vertonghen and Alderweireld, and the freedom that it gives our fullbacks, as well as just that solid middle of Wanyama and Dembele, and then Ali and Eriksson having the freedom to do whatever they want. It's a formation that suits those 11 players absolutely perfectly. However, as we said, you swap one of those players and swap in one of our second choice players, say swap out Vertonghen and swap in Wimmer. There is no way that he's as comfortable in that formation. It's not what he knows. He knows that he's the left-sided centre-half in a 4-4-2, and so we have to be able to, and I think this was the main criticism of Pochettino after the Liverpool game, is the ability to look and see this is what needs to change. We can't just go blindly into a game using the same formation that we did before when things have changed, when the personnel we have to our hands changes, or who we're playing against changes. We have to be able to change it up, but I think just blindly putting these players into a formation that they are clearly not comfortable in, and no one can argue. Kevin Wimmer wasn't comfortable in the back three. Ben Davies was not comfortable as a wing back. You can't argue that.
No, I agree. It's almost like trying to fit square pegs into round holes, isn't it, at times?
You can only do it with square pegs in round holes, and probably the only thing we could try in theory, which again isn't ideal, but maybe you throw Walker on the left and you play Trippier as the right hand side one. And maybe that's a way you at least try and get two genuinely attacking fullbacks to give you the width in the side. But as you say, it's still a square peg in a round hole, and there's absolutely no guarantee that would work.
Difficult one to call. It is a difficult one. Jace, we'll ask you the next one. We've got Regan at RJ Stevens 77, who asked, who is to blame for the tactics on Saturday? Forget the individual errors, but we all know it was suicidal to play a high line. Great question. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, you have to lay the blame of that on Pochettino, because he's the one that decides the setup. But, there's still certain things in that game. I don't mind playing the high line. I don't mind inviting the pressure on. It's interesting, isn't it? People say you should have played Liverpool on the counter-attack. But if you do allow yourselves to be pressed and you move the ball quick enough, it's a way of getting the ball down the other end of the field, through midfield, whilst you've got 6 or 7 of the opposition the wrong side of the ball. So you can still make it a counter-attacking system, even though you're inviting the press. But certainly, Pochettino has to be responsible for Saturday's performance more than anyone else.
Dan, we're going to come back round to you. We've got Lewis Wordsworth at Fact Non-Fiction, who asks, what are the coaching skills Pochettino needs to learn? Hashtag e-Spurs pod. Really good question.
Well, what can he learn, really? Coaching comes with experience. He's not, an Arsene Wenger who's been in the same job for 20 years, but he's still been in jobs for, how long has he been at Espanyol, Southampton? I can't 5-6 years, maybe a bit more, but you'd like to think at the level he's coaching, he sort of knows enough, or certainly he's doing a good job. Whether he can sort of keep learning, I think that just comes with time, really. It's hard to sort of put an individual facet and say he needs to do this better or that better. We're not really sort of privy to what goes on behind the scenes at training, so it's a bit hard for me to sort of answer the question as succinctly as possible, really. Again, I'm a massive fan. I can't fault what he does. I think it would be harsh for me to criticise and to say he needs to do things better. It's a good question, but I don't think it's necessarily one I have the answer for.
Okay, no problem at all. James, what do you think? Would you want to answer that? Anything you can think of that he could improve upon? Is there that argument that in a game that, like I say, we're being pressed, he doesn't have the ability at the moment to find a way to change it against the big teams away from home? Is that a fair argument? What do you think, James?
Yeah, definitely. It kind of fits in with what we were saying about moving formations, whether he needs to be able to spot how we need to change our setup if we're playing against a certain side. But I find it pretty funny that us three sat at home on our laptops are criticising this man who has been entrusted with an entire football club. This guy, he knows his stuff. It's always, sometimes they're going to get it wrong. They really are. Hugo Lloris made mistakes against Man City. People get things wrong, even the people who we're going to expect not to get things wrong. And so if we're going to be as critical as some people have been of Pochettino in the wake of one defeat, then does that make us any different to Arsenal?
Is it nitpicking?
Yeah, definitely. As soon as something goes wrong over at the Emirates, they jump on the bandwagon of wanting the manager out. And we as a fan base ridicule that. And so, when something like this goes wrong, something that, it should have been addressed. It definitely should have been sorted out before the game, but it wasn't. And the fact that we've been so critical of Pochettino, I just think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I echo those faults. I think we would all agree that we've got a tremendous manager. I think I've said many times on this podcast before hosting it, I said, for me, he was very much, the best manager I've ever envisaged growing up watching Spurs. The ability that the man has got is untold with the squad he's got there, with the resources he had, when he came into the job, for the massive turnaround in the overhaul of the squad, to now be able to put out the best 11 we can, in arguably what my opinion is probably the best out there. I know Chelsea are top, but I can honestly say that the type of football we play, I don't think anyone can play it the way Spurs do in the Premier League. It is an absolute joy to watch at times, and I think sometimes people forget just how far we've come, and therefore, unfortunately, naturally, the expectation level just goes up. And it is one of those things, like you've said there, James, it's so hard to find the criticism at times, because you have to remember how far the guy's taken us. You really, really do. We'll stick with you, James, just for a second. We've got Harry Charalambos here at Has-Spur, who asks, when will Poch stop being stubborn and be bold and take off the likes of Eriksen early in these games if he's not up to it?
I think what that comes down to is that we've got such players who are a capability of such brilliance off the back of absolutely nothing. All I can think of was when we lost at Stamford Bridge, but Christian Eriksen started that game appallingly. I think it was in the middle of a spell where he was having a really bad run of form. He wasn't doing anything. All of a sudden he picked the ball up 30 yards from goal, took 2 touches and smashed it in the top corner. And that is why I think you can't be so eager, and I think it's a FIFA player's mentality. Someone misses something on FIFA and you think, I'm going to pull him off straight away. You've got to give these guys a chance, because they are capable of moments of brilliance, especially our players, because they're so mercurial, they're such talents that they can do nothing for a long parts of the game, And Eriksen is one of the culprits of that. He does go missing at times, but then again, Christian Eriksen can pick up a ball and he can find Dele Alli in the 6-yard box from nowhere. And, you know, as you say, have we got someone on the bench who you want to pull Christian Eriksen? Would you pull Christian Eriksen off and put Vincent Janssen on and go 2 up front? No, I mean, not. I wouldn't like to see that personally. And it's not that Pochettino hasn't got the balls to make a decision like that, because this is the same man who's pulling off Moussa Dembele with 70 minutes gone and putting on Harry Winks. So it's not like Pochettino hasn't got the balls to do things like that, because he does, and we've seen that he does.
No, I completely agree with you. I agree, guys. As always, thank you very much for your questions this week. Sorry we haven't got round to all of them. As always, as we've just said, if you would like to get involved in the e-Spurs podcast on a weekly basis, whether it be a topic on Spurs or a previous game played, all you've got to do, again, just to repeat, is go to our Twitter page of @e_Spurs, leave your question with the hashtag eSpursPod, and we will try our very best to read out your question and get an answer from the panel on a weekly basis. Okay, we're going to turn our focus to a couple of very big defining weeks in the Cups, and I just want to read out a message from Hugo Lloris, who says, a strong Europa League campaign is crucial to Tottenham Hotspur building a title-winning mentality. Jace, how big are these cup competitions coming up now? We've said a lot about Spurs in the past being a cup side. I, for one, I've said this week, I've been on called Collymore, TalkSport, saying how crucial it is for Spurs to really, really take the cup seriously this season. There's been that argument in the past that Pochettino hasn't done that with his selection. How much do you want to see a change in stance now of him saying, let's go for these cups, let's really try our best to try and get some silverware this season?
First of all, you're preaching to the converted, aren't you? In that we've said, I think, on a regular basis, every time we've had a cup tie, we want to see us take it seriously. And as I said earlier, the more games you're involved in quarterfinals, away at Stamford Bridge, at semi-finals, you know, the better you are at handling the big occasion when it comes to it. So for me, it's vital. I think this weekend slightly different because it's FA Cup weekend and there's not another Premier League game for 2 weeks, and you've got the 2 Europas. I actually feel that we'll probably play a really strongish side at Fulham, and I think on the back of such a poor performance against Liverpool as well, what you don't want to do is play a weakened side, and then you do go into that next Premier League game possibly on the back of 2 or 3 defeats, and then you're seen as the club in crisis with all the negativity that brings on players that we've seen that Liverpool have been under recently. So for me, I think we might see a real mix on Thursday night of fringe players, if you like. But I think actually at Fulham, I think we'll see quite a strong side. It wouldn't surprise me to see Ali, Kane and Toby and people like that all starting at Fulham next week.
Fingers crossed. Going to come to you, Dan. Obviously your first time on the podcast. Let's get your thoughts. We always like to ask regular guests that come on what their thoughts are on the cup competitions at Spurs. Although we've seen strides in terms of the progression in the league, just how important to you are the cups as a Spurs fan? Or are you more of the kind of guy that wants to see the progression in the league on a year-upon-year basis?
I'm of the belief that I think the club needs to win a trophy, and it needs to win one soon, to be honest, to stop this sort of squad potentially breaking up and going to bigger and better things elsewhere. Because I think we need to get on a winning mentality, get into the winning habit, and that, by winning trophies, will feed into league progression. So I think it's incredibly important. I think last season the circumstances were slightly different because we were much closer in the race for the title, and perhaps the Europa League did take a back seat because we really did think we could win it last season. And perhaps this season, with the gap already being so big, that the cup competitions will probably take more prevalence. And I think with the Europa League offering the place of a Champions League place in it as a prize, I think there's no reason not to give that a full tilt this season. So yeah, I think the cups are incredibly important. Okay,
listen, I agree with you, and it'd be great to see Spurs go full strength. James, question to you: will we go full strength? What do you think?
I think it'll be a bit of a mix and match. I think, you know, I like to see us go with a bit of flair, but then again, you can't expect him to go with the first 11. You know, we've got to be sensible. He's got to manage the players at the end of the day. I mean, if we see more injuries, like you see what the injury to Danny Rose has done to us as a team, if we got another injury like that, then we'd be in big trouble. And so, you know, I like to see us start, you know, the odd first team. I mean, I'd like to see Harry Kane start because I think he needs to get back amongst the goals, you know. But the fringe players, Kevin Nkudu, even Moussa Sissoko, especially Harry Winks, I think that he's a kid who really needs game time, and especially with the form that Moussa Dembele's been in the last 2 or 3 games. So yeah, a nice mixture would be the perfect thing for me, I think.
Jason, in terms of importance, I know obviously the Europa League does offer that Champions League place. Do you have a preference on which cup? Is that a silly question because of the one offering Champions League? Would you like, I mean, are you a bit of a traditionalist? Would you like to see an FA Cup come home to White Hart Lane in its final season?
I'd like to see either of them. I'm not fussed which one it is, although, I've always believed the Europa League is nowhere near the Champions League status, but I've always been a bigger believer in that than most people. And I think part of the problem when I look at the FA Cup, it really dawned on me the other night when you see Derby playing Leicester, and yet they made, 18 changes, and you think this is a fourth round FA Cup tie against two teams that are desperate to go out. And then you have to ask yourself, is it really worth winning a trophy that absolutely nobody seems to be bothered to win? And yet when you look at the Europa League, you'll get teams in Spain and Germany and that will leave players out their league games and make sure they are ready for the Europa League. So perhaps from the traditionalist point of view to win the FA Cup, but there perhaps is now more kudos, and it is seen outside of Britain as being a much better thing to win the Europa League than a pointless FA Cup that it seems that almost every team tries desperately to get knocked out of. The one advantage to winning the FA Cup, mate, is that the reality is we'll probably have to beat two of of an Arsenal, a Chelsea, a Manchester United or a Manchester City. And so, the ability to go and beat two of those sides away, one of them in a semi-final, one of them in the final, both those games being at Wembley with thoughts to next year, in that, there could be more mileage in winning the FA Cup for moving ahead purely because of those winning two massive games against two big sides at Wembley.
No, listen, I agree. Okay, well, let's try and get some predictions then. Let's go round the table. Let's start off with the Europa tie on Thursday. Dan, we'll come to you. What are you going for?
I reckon it'll be a comfortable 2-0 win to us. I think we've had quite a favourable draw with Gent, and it's, again, no disrespect to them, but regardless of sort of how many of our recognised first 11 we play on Thursday, I think we'll have enough in the tank to comfortably dispose of Saturday's memories and set up ourselves nicely for the second leg.
Fingers crossed, like I say, it'd be great to bring away 2 away goals. That would be great. James, what do you make of that game, the Thursday?
I think it'll be a 1-0 win to Tottenham. You say that we're very lucky to get Gent. However, they're not in the worst form. They've beaten some pretty good sides recently, and so I don't think it'll be as easy as we say it will. We're back at Wembley, and as we say, we're not the same team when we play at Wembley sometimes. And so it could be a bit of a cagey one. But yeah, 1-0, I'm going to go Spurs.
Just you mentioned it there, James. How critical is it to take something then away from home in this first leg? Because going back to Wembley, although obviously we won last time out at CSK Moscow, like you said there, our form there hasn't been that great. You would feel that we would want to take away a positive result, wouldn't you, this coming Thursday? We need to get something, don't we, out in Belgium? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think, as you say, we're not great when we're at Wembley, and so to have our heads held high going into that game would be a really good thing. Plus, I like to think about all the lads who travel out there to go and see us play. They spend a lot of money, and I hope we take it seriously. Yeah, no, very good shout. Very much indeed. And Jace, what do you make of that game? What do you think?
Well, I think, on the surface of it should be a comfortable enough game, and we should be capable of getting a result against Gent with a half side. But let's be fair, we thought that against Wickham. And look how wrong that was. There was a chance, wasn't it? You think Wickham, when that tie was made, we were as excited about that as Wickham were, because we thought it'd just be a nice easy afternoon. So, it should be a comfortable win, but let's not be as complacent. Let's make sure we go there and certainly perform in that first half and get the tie won before we start switching our minds off this time.
I agree. And come looking at the Fulham tie on the Sunday, Dan. Fulham, they're placed 9th in the Championship at the moment. They're quite a few points off the playoffs. I'd wonder how they'll go. I mean, their manager seems to think they'll take it quite seriously. Do you expect to see a pretty much a strong Spurs team there on the Sunday? Yeah,
I would have thought so. I don't think Fulham will be a pushover. I think it might even be the harder of the two games, to be honest. They've already disposed of Hull, so they've got a Premier League scalp already this season in the Cup. So, and again, a London derby always makes it that little bit more feisty than normal. So, should be play a full-strength team. I think that one will be 2-1 to Spurs, but I think a replay would also be like the worst result, because then it's an extra sort of game that we don't necessarily need right now. But yeah, I think both teams will score, but I think Spurs will just edge it.
Okay, and James, what do you think?
I'm going to have to agree with that. I'm going to have to say 2-1 Spurs as well. I think we'll probably concede because, just because of the atmosphere, just because of the Spurs being Spurs, I mean, if it's Spurs being Spurs, then I expect we'll have a man sent off in the first 10 minutes and we'll lose 4-0.
Oh, God.
2-1 Tottenham.
Yeah,
Isn't that what happened last time we went to Fulham, wasn't it, for a cup tie?
It was.
It is, yeah.
We're 2-0 down in 10 minutes.
I mean, I was trying to think of the nicer 4-0 win, the one with the Berbatov beautiful
The Berbatov
flick.
and Keane volleys.
And oh God, I mean, they were the days. It's funny now. You look at our strike force, and it's funny. I mean, we have improved. Don't get me wrong, every area. Harry Kane's a phenomenal striker, but I mean, what a partnership that Keane Berbatov was. Great game that one was a great game, but yeah, hasn't been fond memories, Jace, of the last visit at Craven Cottage in the Cup. What are you going to go for?
As I say, I think I actually believe we'll go quite strong, and because of what happened at Liverpool, I think it's actually made it a better scenario for us. I think that we'll be desperate to bounce back, show that there's a bit more to us than last time. I think there'll be a few players with criticism ringing in their ears from Saturday. You know, Pochettino's comment about we didn't look a side that's ready to win a title. If that's what he's told us, you can imagine what he told the dressing room. So I think there'll be a few that owe him a performance, owe the supporters a performance, and I think we'll get the result there. Whereas perhaps had we won at Liverpool, we'd have taken that complacency there and thought, well, you know, everything in the garden's rosy, and we might have slipped up. So no, I expect us to go to Fulham and win.
And you say, I mean, like you said there, it may work out to be, I hate to say it, a bit of a blessing in disguise, this, because he may not now rest on his laurels in regards to the cuts because of the backlash of the weekend. I think, like I say, he's now kind of got himself in a hole where he will have to try and get a couple of positive results. Not to say that he was going to throw the games, but I think now he will go a little bit more stronger when he may not necessarily have done so, because I think any Tottenham fan, if you speak to the majority of Spurs fans, they will tell you that Tottenham are typically in the past a cup team, and you would argue that under his reign, that has pretty much not been the case with Spurs. You know, we've thrown quite a few competitions. We haven't played to the best of our potential. And all I can hope is that I say we do take this cup seriously, because you speak to any Spurs fan at the moment, the next level for Spurs is to obtain a cup, and that would then put us on that benchmark with the rest of the clubs. Guys, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Dan, thank you very much for making your debut with us tonight.
Thank you, really enjoyed it. It's been great.
James, as always, thank you for coming back with us.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me again, mate.
Pleasure, not a problem. And Jace, thank you as always.
No problem, mate. Therapy over, and we'll be back on the sofa next Monday.
We will be indeed. The class is dismissed. Guys, thank you very much as always. And as always, come on you Spurs! Hi guys, it's the e-Spurs competition. Now, as you may know, for the past couple of weeks, we've been running a competition across our social media channel with the prize of winning a replica 1983 Spurs away shirt. Firstly, thanks to all those who entered, and it's now time to find out who has won. We've randomly selected 5 of you who've entered, and from those 5, we will now pick your winner. So, Jace, you've got the 5 names in the bag. It's down to you. Will you please draw the winner of the competition?
I have indeed, mate. I'll fiddle around in the bucket here. What we got here? Pull a bit of paper open here. We've got Tom XL is the winner.
Congratulations to Tom XL. I can confirm that a 1983 Spurs away replica shirt will be on its way to you. Congratulations. Don't forget to tune in to next week, guys. We'll be announcing another competition which I can reveal is exclusive to the e-Spurs podcast, meaning this is just for our fantastic listeners, and you won't see this one across any of the social media channels. So make sure you listen to the e-Spurs podcast next week for all the exclusive information on that competition. And once again, Tom, that shirt will be on its way to you very, very shortly.